Hi, I'm Espen Kraft and I make retro-inspired 80s synth-pop. This is Keyboard Magazine, the December issue of 1987. And if you have 25 minutes to spare, I'd like to take you through this issue of December 1987. So just relax, sit back, fire up your pipe, have a soft drink or a single malt, and let me take you through. And here we have it, the Keyboard Magazine of December 1987. The fine picture of Weird Al Yankovic with his accordion. Accordion Power was the title of this issue. But my main concern with this issue back then, I still remember buying this issue, is the Roland D50 Clinic at the top there. Eric Pershing has a nice and long insight of how to make sounds on the D50 inside called a clinic. And my eyes also spotted the Roland S50 here, the Akai S700, and these were samplers I was very interested in back then. So this issue triggered me really back then, and I bought it, of course. I didn't subscribe to it. I bought the issues as I saw I could afford them, or if they had interesting content back then. So let's see what's inside. Ah yes, the first thing that greets us is this Korg ad about their top line back then, the DSS-1. I have that, of course, and also the module version, the DSM-1. And Korg often had ads on the very first page of Keyboard Magazine. I have some other back issues as well, and they were often featured at page 1 and 2, or is this page 2 and 3? Well, Korg always had this spot in this magazine as far as I can remember. So that's some cool samplers. And yeah, the features of this magazine. Letters to the editor was always featured pretty early on in this magazine. DX2 secrets. The DX was still going hot in 1987. And some analog digital definitions. Someone's not happy, it seems, by something said before. Ah yes, the Casio FZ1 16-bit linear sampling synthesizer. $2,499. Well, this was pretty exciting back then because it had a graphic display, a bigger so than the usual two-line displays, and you could draw waveforms in the sampler as well to make up new sounds. It had a very advanced synthesizer as well, in addition to the sampling. Sampling was very hot and big in 1987. See the phenomenal FZ1. Yeah. More letters. I remember this ad was featured a lot back then. I never got to try this. I don't know how it performed or really anything about it. Jim Aiken, still going strong. I recently saw his posting on a Facebook forum. So he's still at large. And a guest editorial by Bob Moog himself. Where's the knobs? He's complaining about new synths not having knobs and faders. And he's right, he was right. Back then it was all menu-driven membrane button synths, like the DX7. I grew up with this type of synth, so for me this was not a very big deal, but I can see what it means. Mark of the Unicorn, performer, of course. Ah yes, Patchwork Patches. This was one of the ways we could learn and get new patches back then for synths, because people would send in their best patches in a readable form, and if you had any of these synths, you could just programming in some new programs or patches. And this issue has patches for the Casio CC101, the ARP2600, the Yamaha DX7, and Prophet VS. At this time I didn't have any of these synths, so unfortunately I could not make those patches back then for these synths. Some records in review, The Kawai K5. I remember the K1 especially was pretty good. And of course Alesis with their MMT8 sequencer. That was my first sequencer. A very, very nice pattern-based sequencer. And you had the HR16, the drum machine. Same cool design. And some world view reviews of artists and releases. Official news from the Yamaha users group called Aftertouch. I remember that, where you could learn about new Yamaha stuff. More world view reviews. And yes, we have Roland here. Sample the power of the Roland S50. Roland samplers back then, S50, 550, with its composite outputs. You could have it all on screen on a real monitor. A big thing. And here we have it, the S50 and the S550. You can see that on my channel. I have a video on that. Probably one of the best sounding samplers ever made in my view, the S50 and S550. Very, very nice sound. I have the S10 as well, and it has the same sound and is even more easy to operate, but not as advanced. Keyboard readers acknowledge excellence. Nice. Bruce Hornsby, Best New Talent in 1987. Tony Banks, Best Rock Keyboardist. New Age Keyboardist, Brian Eno, of course. Cool stuff. Technical innovation, the Roland D50. Nice. Opcode had some ads, and here's the keyboard clinic for the D50 by none other than Eric Pershing himself. That's the guy who made most of the classic, now pretty much infamous D50 presets back then. And this clinic really helped me understand the D50 a little later. I didn't get the D50 the same day it came out in Norway because it cost a lot. I wasn't old enough to make that kind of money. But a little later I got hold of the D50, and this clinic really helped me understand how to shape that synth engine into nice presets or patches that I used for my work and during my live gigs back then. Very thorough. Although he says this clinic only touches the possibilities, but it is pretty extensive, this clinic. Goes through the structures of the D50. As you remember, the D50 had both sampled parts, the PCM sample, the short snippets that could be combined with the synthesis structure of the engine, and together those two made those sounds that were unique and new and fresh and exciting back then. Very, very cool. Dr. T's, yes, I remember that. Just some music software for the Amiga. The Amiga was always put in the shadows by the Atari ST back then, but the Amiga itself had a big following the tracker community, so there was a lot of music software for the Amiga as well. Moving on, Dr. T, I tried that briefly, never something I took to, but I know a lot of guys used it. More of the Roland clinic, LFOs, key follows, and here it goes into different type of sounds like brass attacks and vocal sounds. The Concorde doesn't fly anymore. Steinberg already coming on board big time back then. You could buy synthesizer videos and multi-keyboard masterclasses back then on VHS, I assume. And Keyboard Magazine always also had more in-depth interviews and features on all types of music. Ah yeah, the Apex column keyboard stand. This keyboard here right now is on an Apex column stand, so that's the classic keyboard stand of the 80s, with those feet and the shape here. And you have to have those clothes and that coat as well to be really authentic. Stanford's Computer Music Lab. They apparently had some research going into what would be the tomorrow's push button magic. And the front cover said that this was a type of accordion issue, and a lot of musicians back then really took to the accordion in different ways. The accordion was never my thing, but I have used some accordion type sounds from synths during my day. And I remember Tom Bailey of the Thompson Twins, he also used the accordion sometimes. And Thompson Twins was more in my part of town, so to speak, musically, more than Al Yankovic or Tom Waits for that matter. But I love Tom Waits, no doubt about it. And Ensoniq, the first of, I assume, will be more Ensoniq ads in this issue, because when they had an ad, they often had the ads at every 2 pages for a while in the issue. So if you have ad for the Ensoniq SQ80 here, I bet there's an Ensoniq ad on the next page as well. And yes, it is the EPS performance sampler. MIDI and MIDI for the accordion. Ah yes, more Ensoniq, the ESQ1. I have a video on that one if you check back on my channel, the ESQM, the module version. More accordion power. The Mirage, the first affordable sampler. And more accordions. More Roland digital pianos. Ah, the Kawai R50 drum machine. Very cool little thing. I'd like to have this on my channel one day. I've been looking out for this, but it hasn't surfaced locally around these parts for a long time now. And many of you can probably remember that with Keyboard Magazine there was this vinyl single with some sort of promotion or some of the featured artist or whatever, and this is an accordion thing for this issue. I used to play these on my vinyl record player. I should probably put it on right now, but I'll leave that for another day. So I'll just leave it in the magazine. Moving on. Some Chicoria inside on the process. Some FM type graphic editing systems. The Carvin mixer was often featured as far as I can remember. The Microverb from Alesis. That was probably my first, or was it the MIDI-verb? I think the Microverb was my first outboard effect unit back in the day. I can't remember exactly when this came out, but it must have been around this time because it's featured as an ad in this magazine. And here you can order some keyboard back issues. I wonder if you filled in this form now and sent it in, if you could still buy those. You probably couldn't, but you could buy some Roland D50 sounds. And some editing software for the samplers by DigiDesign. And you know who DigiDesign is or who they were back then. They evolved into something much bigger later on. You can Google that if you want to. And the Emacs, of course, a great one. I have that. Check my channel for more on that. Love the Emacs. Must admit it's one of my favorites. Lexicon has a little ad here. 14 issues for the price of 12. A MIDI mod for the Casio SK1. Phil Collins and Chester Thompson, the drums of Genesis. Guitar MIDI controller, never saw that one apart from in this ad. Every musician has his vice. And here we have the section where you could actually learn something about music theory and tips and tricks, and I always read these very carefully. I found a lot of good stuff from Keyboard Magazine in these articles back then. Technical exercises, arpeggios, etc. Some jazz stuff, always good stuff to learn from jazz musicians to use in pop, always. 13th chords, very nice. More private lessons. Dave Stewart is a legend. Rock keyboards. The piano technician, where you could learn something about the actual piano in terms of design and build. And this was a very nice feature back then, Analog versus Digital by Howard Massey. Sampling and the digital representation of an analog waveform was not something everyone understood, so this was a very nice article to read up on that stuff. The cutoff frequency and things like that. And more on MIDI. And yeah. Local area networks. MIDI lag delays. Jim Cooper, you know who that was. Cooper Electronics. And here we have the S900, the standard, de facto standard in sampling back then. Very, very nice sounding sampler. Love that one. Books on synthesizer programming. Getting the most from MIDI delays. Sampling spec, an article on that, and also something on tape editing. Two different worlds back then. And here we have the keyboard report articles. First one, Roland S50 with the sampler versions 2.0. More on that. More smaller ads. The Cakewalk Sequencer, anyone remembers that? I never used that myself, but I had friends that used Cakewalk for many, many years. I tried it. And here we have some shorter updates on different types of gear. Akai S900 2.0, the Akai S700, the Voyager Sequencer Plus. I know one guy that used the Sequencer Plus and released lots of good records made by using the Voyager Sequencer Plus. That's a screenshot from that sequencer. And some reviews of the S700. I have that one as well. And more spec sheets at coming towards the end here, and we have the ads, the regular ads from people selling their stuff. A Fairlight Series 3 for sale, and he's asking. Let's see, it's 14 megabytes of memory on board, yeah, plus 150 megabyte hard drive. Latest software, including a road case, less than 1 year old, mint condition, asking price $54,995. Serious inquiries only. That's cool. And we're slowly coming to an end here, and the last ad before we turn the page is the ad for the Oberheim DPX1. That's a sample player. It could play samples from different kinds of systems. And I know a guy who uses this even to this day, and it sounds very good. It can play samples from the Emulator 2, the Prophet 2000, and the Mirage. I wonder if it could play from the Akai S900 as well. We're adding compatibility with the Akai S900 samplers, yes. And the last page is an ad for the Yamaha TX81Z. I have that on my video as well. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little trip back to 1987 and a great issue of Keyboard Magazine. As always, I'm Espen Kraft and I am the 80s. So until next time, take care. Cheers.